So Susan and I went last Sunday night to Carnegie, to the movies down there, and you may have seen this movie, His Only Son, that was advertised. And it's really interesting portrayal of the life of Abraham as he is preparing to offer Isaac, and it goes back through the story and tells the story. And apparently it was made by a young man who had spent some time in Afghanistan, and he made the movie for hardly any money, but to get it distributed takes a lot of money, and the producers of The Chosen found out about it, and they got their supporters, and it came in and decided they would distribute this movie. But one of the things it shows is, by the way, it's going to be showing in Cordell here in the next few days. It is right now. I recommend you going because it makes you think about, we have these scriptures, chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14, chapter 15. It makes it feel like it all is right there together and it happened all at one time, and yet was spread over 25 years. And when you begin to watch this and you think that Abraham was talked to maybe not very often, and yet he continued to hold on to his faith, it makes it for an interesting thought process at least. So I would recommend you going and seeing this story about Abraham and think about faith along the way through. The difference is that you and I get to look at these scriptures daily if we want to, and we gather together and talk about them 2 or 3 times a week, and we get reminded often. I don't think people of old got reminded very often. So that brings me to the question as to why were all these letters written to these congregations, to different congregations? Can you give me some reasons why they were written?
Encouragement.
All right, one of them is encouragement. One of them is to be encouraged, because you know that they did not have anything that even resembled this book. They wouldn't have anything that resembled this book for hundreds and hundreds and over 1,000 years. And even then you had to wait for the printing press to be developed so that they could begin to print something. And you had to wait for people to learn how to read. And it just, so the letters would be sent once in a while, once in a great while, and that's why I'm bringing this up about Abraham. It just struck me. The thing that I couldn't get off my mind was how maybe infrequently he talked to God. And yet, when he talked to God, he hung on to what he had heard. And I'm wondering how infrequently the people of the New Testament that are receiving these letters hear, about what life is supposed to be like. They go a long time. You may remember me telling you that there's a reproduction of a church building that was uncovered by some architects in the year 400 AD. It was reproduced in Houston, Texas. A really well-known trial attorney built a theological library where he went around the world buying the libraries of the greatest theologians he could find in the world. And then he brought them and placed them in his library, and people come from all over the world to study. And sometimes he would find theologians who had not yet died, and he would say, "I'll give you the money now if you'll will to me your library." Well, he built this church building. And the interesting thing is, can you guess how it's shaped? I've done a wedding in that church building. It's shaped in the shape of a cross. It's got the long part here, and it's got the wings that go out right here. And what he had reproduced on the ceiling were, on the far end, pictures of creation, and pictures of a flood in Noah, and pictures of David killing a giant, and pictures. It goes all the way over to here until behind you over here, it's the resurrection of Jesus. And he would say that they didn't have anything in that year when this was uncovered. And what they would do is they would gather together and they would point at pictures and they would retell the stories over and over again. So one of the reasons the letters are written is for encouragement. What would be another reason?
Reminder.
All right, to remind. to remind people of a variety of things that happened and to remind people of how they are supposed to live their lives based on the things that have happened. Any other thing you can think of? Warnings to hold fast to this.
Teaching and correction.
Okay, all right. The teaching and correction. That's the one that interests me mostly, because I understand the encouragement and I understand the warnings, but I know what I'm like and I know what people are like, and we tend to gravitate into what?
Rebellion.
Well, it could be rebellion, or just habits, or what I'm thinking right now, or what you've been talking to me about, and it's especially true, for example, in the book of Romans. Remember how Paul will write in the book of Romans, and he'll talk about, what are you people thinking? Don't you know what happened when you were baptized? You became new creatures, but you're not acting like new creatures. And he goes, it's bringing them back, having to instruct them, and that's what the writer of the book of Hebrews is doing, is trying to say, look, you've gotten away from what you know to be right, and you're just going backwards to what you used to do. So these letters for these congregations, we're told that, how would we know, but we're told that the congregation at Ephesus would get it, and they would pass it around, and they would read it, they'd study it, and maybe they'd loan it to another church, and so forth, and maybe someone would copy it in a scroll, and all that becomes really fascinating. But Peter is doing the same thing. Paul does it mostly. John will do it, but Peter's doing the same thing. He's giving a reminder, and he's giving an encouragement, and he's giving some instruction to correct. So this is where he begins in chapter 5. To the elders among you. Now this is interesting. This is talking directly to whom? The leaders, the elders among you. Talking directly to them. I appeal as a fellow elder. So Peter is involved in that same thing. A witness, not only am I a fellow elder, but I am a witness of Christ's sufferings. Now he spent all of chapter 4, or a good part of chapter 4, at least the last half of chapter 4, talking about our sufferings. Remember that? And he said, don't think these sufferings you're having are some strange thing. These fiery trials come upon everyone. So I'm a witness of Christ's sufferings. And one who will also share in the glory that's to be revealed. That is a reminder, Burke. That's a reminder that sometimes we forget there is a glory to be revealed. There's something big coming. There's something really big coming. Now the problem with me saying that is what?
We don't know when.
We don't know when. And what's the other problem?
We don't know what.
We what?
We don't know what.
We don't know exactly what. We have some ideas of what, but not know exactly. But how long have we been saying that? And how long have we been repeating this?
2,000 years.
For a long, long time. For at least 1950 years, we've been saying he's coming, and he's coming really soon, and yet we go through life and get really busy, and here's a reminder that we will all share in the glory that's to be revealed. Now to you elders, be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, serving as overseers. Now, shepherd of God's flock. What does that mean? What does that mean?
A protector and a watcher over them.
Protector?
Well, he's a teacher.
All right, could be a teacher, a guide.
Well, Christ Christ had instructed Peter and the rest to be like
Feed my
a
sheep.
sheep,
Mhm.
guarding his sheep,
Yeah.
protecting them, leading them.
Example?
And he'll talk about example here. The word use of the word shepherd and the word use of the word sheep would be so very familiar to these people. It's not so familiar to us, is it? I mean, I know very little about sheep, very little, but apparently they have to be guided. Everybody understand that? They have to be guided.
Sheep are stupid.
All right. She says sheep. I'll just use the word not very smart. I've noticed that among some. No, that's a joke. So they're not very smart. They're not very fierce, are they? So a wolf can come among sheep and do what?
Eat them all.
Destroy them all. Destroy a big bunch of them and do it really, really quickly.
He gets to that in the next letter.
Yeah, he will get to that next letter. And so the shepherd is there to watch over, and to make sure they're having enough to eat. And most shepherds that we have known have a couple of dogs to help them. And those dogs are specially trained dogs, and they're there to watch. And so where Susan and I lived, before the man died, before he got in poor health, he used to keep that whole 20 acres over there covered in sheep, and kept it beautiful. People would come around the curve, they'd stop and they'd watch. And he would tell Suze, and she had a little black dog then. Sure glad she doesn't anymore, but she had a little black dog then. And that's a joke too, okay? But he said to her, you need to understand, if that little dog gets across that fence, he may well get killed, because these dogs don't let anything close to the sheep. You know, they protect, like they really protect. Now I went and cut a hole in that fence, but it's, you know, but okay, I'm going to quit about that, okay? But anyway, they have to be protected. That's what elders do. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it 20 times, that most elderships today act like they do in their corporate business world. And they are dealing with the church and their local congregation as if it is a business, and as if everybody is their employee and they don't know the idea of being a shepherd. You hear it all the time. You're serving as overseers, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be. Now, what's the willing part have to do with all that? Why would you have to be willing?
A lot.
It's what?
A lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
If you're not willing, you wouldn't be very good at it.
No, that's right. If you're not willing, if you don't have a desire, are you good at anything for which you don't have a desire? You just kind of shove it off to the side. It's not important. It's not a high priority. It's just something I've got to do. It's something you have to really want to do. You have to really want to do. And you're certainly not doing it for money. It doesn't pay well, I don't think. I haven't checked lately, but the two Gregs, it's not paying all that well, is it? So, but you're eager to serve. You're eager to serve because you know this is God's work. And is it important work? I am confident that it's really, really important work, because left to my own devices without some kind of guidance, and in this day, and think about in this day, they didn't even have this book that they would read daily. They didn't have this book that they could read at all. They probably couldn't read at all, most of them. And so the shepherds were what? constantly reminding and constantly encouraging, constantly protecting, and so forth.
I think that's where, on the qualifications where it says, we like to say apt to teach. Back in the day, they were the teachers because they could read. I feel like they were the only ones that could read, so they
Yeah.
were apt to be reading and teaching. Somebody had to read the letter.
Yeah, a few people could, but it was not that people went to grammar school for 6 years or for 8 years and learned. It just wasn't that well known. That's why in the Jewish world, the priest and the teachers of the law could gain such power over the people because they had the what? Knowledge. And so out of that was born this cliche that has been used forever in the leadership world that says, knowledge is power. If you've got the knowledge, you've got the power. And I have known some people who kept the knowledge wrapped around them right here so that you couldn't have it, you couldn't borrow it, and they had power over you.
And that was the point when you brought the printing press. That's that. Certain groups had control over the scripture for so long that nobody else got to read it. But then printing press came along, and everybody had a chance to read it.
And more people began to read then, but people began to say, this doesn't line up with what I've been hearing for the last so many years, So, but not lording it over people. What does that mean?
You're holding your position over people. Bossy.
That's the best word it could be. Greg just said bossy, not being bossy. I'm telling you, lording it over people doesn't work for very long. I remember hearing a speaker in Lubbock years and years ago. He had just written a book and he was going on a national speaking tour, and he came over to my office for a while, and I'd heard him speak downtown and so forth, and he said, you only have so many yells in you. He said, you only get so many yells and your credibility's all gone. You only have so many explosions in you, he said, and it's all gone. You have so many outbursts in you, and it's all gone. And so if your children live with continual outbursts, there's a time when they don't want to hear it anymore. They escape. And every leadership thing you're going to read in modern world, even in military circles, even in the military world, they are teaching the military leaders that you do not scream and yell, and it's not like Sergeant Carter and Gomer Pyle. It's not that way.
Unless you're in the Marine Corps.
Unless you're in the Marine Corps, yeah. But they learn that you motivate people not by jumping all over them. You motivate people by inviting people and working with people, and you don't lord it over them. But you, and somebody used this word a moment ago, you be examples to the flock. You be examples to the flock. And that word actually always haunts me a little bit. You be examples to the flock. Because what I know is, if you're in a position of leadership, people are always watching. Everybody understand that? People are always watching. Suze told me yesterday, I don't know if she went into the grocery store or ran where, but not even recognizing people around her, 2 different people stopped her who knew her. And she didn't recognize immediately. And she sent me back to the grocery store late last night, or sometime last night, to pick up some bananas and some stuff to go in our drink. And I'm standing there trying to figure out what bananas to get because they're green and whatever. And this guy says, Ken Jones? And I turn around, I don't know who this guy is. I absolutely don't know who he is. He said, I thought you left Lubbock. And I said, I did. I'm back here for a banquet. Still don't know who he is. I think when he left, he let out some curse words. I really do. I think I don't know who the guy was, but he knew who I was, and he was watching me. And people are always watching. And what if I'm ranting and raving, and which I've been known to do? Everybody understand that? I am well aware that even today, after all this time in Lubbock, I got to be really careful. And even in other places, I have to be really careful. Because how do I know it's not a former student? How do I know it's not somebody that's watching?
God's always watching.
And God's always watching. But we're supposed to be examples to people around us. And that's the old adage, is why people don't want to be a preacher's kid. You know, is because they feel like they're under a microscope all the time. People are always watching. You
Also,
know.
like, didn't they say one of the qualifications of elders is they're above reproach, which would fall into something in the community?
Yeah, an elder is supposed to be above reproach, which means that everybody's watching, and you've got to have that attitude. Now, is this hard? Is it hard? Well, it goes with the territory of being a leader. It goes with the territory. Leadership is a very high calling. And we are very fortunate in this congregation to have two men who are willing to be leaders. And it is a high calling. And it says, and when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive a crown of glory that will never fade away. And I'm telling you, they get tired. And one of the things that kills ministers and shepherds, elders, is people come in and people leave. And people come in and people leave. And you get so what? Discouraged. You get so discouraged along the way. So it sounds like I'm just teaching to two people, but I'm not teaching to two people. Gideon, by the way, it says in verse 5, young men. Now it starts talking to young men. That's not talking to me. Okay, I'm exempt from that. Young men. But there's some interesting things that happen right here too that we'll touch next week.